And no one believes that.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to the Sunday Club. And as you can see, right in the middle of our screen, we have a new guest, Wyatt Claypool. You've been following him on Twitter on his astute takes on the present Canada-India face-off. He works with the National Telegraph. And I'm really happy, Wyatt, that you agreed to join us today. We're quite a motley bunch, but we really appreciate you being here. And whose phone is ringing, for heaven's sake? Of course, Professor. This happens all the time. Muting him. And then, of course, there's Suhel Seth, there's Srimoy, and there's Professor Sen Gupta. All of them happy to join us. AIM is at a film premiere, so if he's done on time, he will join us. That's what he said. But let's just start straight up with Wyatt. Wyatt, how unprecedented is this face-off?
Well, it's been a wild ride, but the thing is that it hasn't exactly been unprecedented. The thing between India and Canada right now, and I've been going off for the past few days just about the lack of evidence being presented by Justin Trudeau. Now, in the last basically 16 hours or so, the Five Eyes allies, like basically anonymously, and some U.S. diplomats are saying, okay, there's a little bit more to Justin Trudeau's accusation than just the accusation itself. So hopefully we will actually get an actual good piece of information. But this whole story is not just about Nijar and this particular standoff of whether or not India might have, whacked him or had someone do it, or at least we're talking about it at the same time that it happened. Or maybe it didn't happen when we actually see the evidence come up. We don't know. The thing is that this whole thing was always going to happen eventually, like a standoff between India and Canada, when Canada has effectively just become a home base for the Khalistanis movement, just as obviously we would get into a row with any other country if it just happened to be that you're allowed to have, training camps and temples with banners on it talking about murdering officials from that country. Obviously, it was going to happen. And for some reason in Canada, we just don't take India seriously enough. So we just consider India this country where, well, if they're yelling about something, it's probably just some weird regional issue. It's probably something far away that we don't have to care about. It's like, well, you do have to care about it when you're letting yourself become effectively just becoming the hotel for terrorists.
Yeah, you can check in but never check out, right? That's what Canada is looking like to us from
You're
this.
way more correct about that than you think, because you can check it. You can if you're Nijar, you can check in, and it doesn't matter how many times you violate the immigration policies and laws. You'll never be kicked out.
Exactly. Srimoy, Trudeau has had a very awkward relationship with India. Uh, his last trip, he was in costume and was hanging around and going places, and the government was kind of cold. They did the pre-functionary sort of ceremonial thing, but didn't kind of reach out to him beyond that. Then subsequently, even this time around when he came for G20, his first we heard he had this issue at the hotel itself, wherein he didn't take the presidential suite because there was some issue, so he took a normal room. And then he went on to have his plane malfunction, so he didn't leave for 2 days. But in those 2 days, he sat in his room all day and even declined an offer of a government plane. So it's been sort of weird, his vibe.
Hello, am I audible?
Yeah, Shimoy, we can hear you.
Yeah. So, I can understand Trudeau's pain because I'm probably the only person in this wide world, apart from Trudeau, who's gone through that kind of pain since I've had a tooth extraction last week. So, I understand kind of pain that Trudeau went through. That said, it's very interesting that you started off by mentioning Trudeau's last 2018 trip. That kind of, if I can just digress for 1 second, uh, Trudeau and Rahul Gandhi both have a lot in common, and cosplay is
Yes.
one more thing between them. Yeah, both love cosplays. So, but unfortunately, statecraft is not conducted that way. And as Trudeau is finding out, it's one thing to be the prime minister of a country which is surrounded by seas on all three sides and a benevolent friend on another side, and another thing to come toe to toe with a rising power which is not going to take your bullshit lightly. So he's in a lot of soup, and as I understand, a lot of the things many people that I'm in touch with, obviously they are not opening up too much, but I can tell you with certain degree of confidence that Canada, or rather Trudeau, has gone out on a limb asking for a favor from allies, especially US, on this issue, and he has largely been ignored. But once again, we have to understand the dynamics between US and Canada, which I think people in India don't quite get. Canada is just family for US. It's not just a Five Eyes partner and a G7 partner. It's just family. And for Canadians to go to the US and for Americans to go to Canada, I have a few friends on both countries, so I know how easy it is. So so when Sullivan comes before reporters, or when Blinken tells people that we are not going to get a free pass to anyone, there's a huge hue and cry in India, but we kind of don't understand that they are not in a position to not say these things. They'll have to say, but watch what they're doing. At the very same time that Blinken is saying this, or Sullivan is saying this, the Quad is conducting a foreign ministers meet. There is an I2U2 collaboration which came out on space. There are a lot more things going on both countries. So I think right now what is happening on the surface, the kind of stories that are coming out in New York Times, which kind of has a section of Indian geopolitical commentators in a tizzy about US puppeteering the whole thing. Well, like, Americans have a lot to do on in the background. I'm not denying that, but all I'm saying is that America is not going to jeopardize its relationship with India for Canada. And there's a saying in Hindi. I don't know what the English saying for that is. हाथी के दांत खाने का है एक और दिखाने का एक. So that, I think, is the key word here.
So essentially, you're saying the Americans are playing a bit of. And Suhel, say it, please.
हाथी के दांत खाने के कुछ और दिखाने के कुछ और. Let me tell you, Trudeau is an absolute scoundrel. His pedigree is full of scoundrel behavior and roguish. His father was a scoundrel, so the apple really hasn't fallen far from the tree. Canada, sadly, with all due respect to Mr. Claypool, is today a banana republic. It is led by an absolute joker who oscillates between being a jerk and a joker. You saw the way he was treated by his own citizens when he and Zelensky got out of the Royal York Hotel 2 nights ago. Canada has been harboring terrorists. Canada has been supporting secession in an outside state. If we have killed someone there and if we are responsible, damn good. Good for it. What's good for the goose is also good for the gander. When the United States goes out and kills people who have harmed the United States, then all these white countries feel damn good about it. Oh, we killed a terrorist. Why should your terrorist be any less of a bloody terrorist than ours? Why should our national security be threatened by some jokers who are willy-nilly playing into the hands of these people for votes? I love Canadians. I have many Canadian friends. But that doesn't mean that the government of Canada should be given a free pass in the manner that they think they will get. I have no respect for the United States. They're a bunch of hypocritical rascals themselves. Everyone knows that. The United States is in bed only when they choose to be. And going to bed with the United States is like going to sleep with an elephant. You never know when it rolls over and the pleasure turns into pain. We are experiencing that. The tragedy is that Justin Trudeau doesn't deserve to run Canada. But then the tragedy with Canada is that it has only 2 seasons, construction and winter. Amidst these 2 seasons, you have these jerks running around. I mean, can you imagine, Wyatt? I actually feel sad for the right-thinking Canadian citizen to have a joker running the country who uses phraseology which makes no bloody sense. What is a credible allegation? Allegation in itself is incredible. It is non-proven. So what do you mean by credible allegation? What do you mean that we have shared this data? You shameless scoundrel. You come to our country for the G20 as recently as that. You don't have the balls to raise this issue on our soil because you know these are allegations. You go back like a whimpering, sniveling scoundrel to your country and for political brownie points that you wish to score with those rascals who are sheep in Sikh hiding in Parliament. And let me tell you, we don't need a lecture from Canada or from any other jokers in Canada about Sikhs. They are the pride of India and they will remain so. There are more Sikhs who have sacrificed their lives for Indian freedom and in the Indian armed forces than anyone else. And we are proud of them. Canada is trying to muddy the waters by trying to say that, oh, all the Sikhs want secession. Bullshit. Amrinder Singh, the former chief minister, gave a fitting reply to this little joker Trudeau by saying that this man talks utter rubbish. So here's the scenario. India can either be namby-pamby like we used to be and say, oh, we must support Canada because it's a developed country. What bloody developed country is Canada? What development? Half their goddamn revenues in terms of overseas comes from Indian students paying and studying there. What has Canada got? Canada has got natural resources, fine, that they're blessed with. What innovations has Canada done except have Isidore Sharp, who created the Four Seasons hotel brand? What else? I mean, I may be wrong. And I'm sure Canada's achieved a lot in the world, as it should. Our battle is not with Canada. Our battle is not with the average Canadian. Our battle is with the manipulation of scoundrels like Trudeau, who are manipulating the Canadian citizen, who are manipulating the citizen of Indian origin in Canada, and worse still, trying to manipulate a community which is known for its bravery, integrity, and patriotism. To do that, you have to be a lowlife, which is what Justin Trudeau is, and it will be proven so. Thank you.
Wyatt, since he said so much about Canada and Trudeau, do you want to come in quickly?
Yeah, I actually like almost starting from the hypothetical. Like, let's just say 100%, and this because this is kind of my recent posting on Twitter also reflects this. Let's just hypothetically say 100% India did it. While I wouldn't be so forward in saying, well, who cares if it's a good thing that they would have maybe taken terrorists out on Canadian soil. A little bit different when it's like two allied countries and you want to know who's operating your country. I understand where he comes from the frustration, though, because I think what's going to happen if it comes out that Justin Trudeau, like, he was nervous in the past few days because he wasn't allowed to release information and he got him stuck between a hard place, like a rock and a hard place, where he wants to say the allegation, but he also cannot give the information. If some point he can give the information, let's just say it's very solid. Okay, well, the one thing that we have to do, especially the Canadian media, who all they want to do is defend Justin Trudeau, and they want to turn this into a big Justin Trudeau victory party at the end of the day, is that, well, we should really contend with the fact that we're probably abusing our sovereignty when we never give extradition. We never give extradition orders to people who are accused of heinous crimes in foreign countries. Obviously, we cannot say that we're completely innocent in the chaos that's been created. Justin Trudeau literally brought a convicted terrorist to India in 2018. Like when was the last time India brought some FLQ terrorist from Quebec on a trip to Canada who once blew up some sort of like a parliament building or killed an official? Like, that would be insane. Like, this is why for a bit the UK was mad at Massachusetts in the US for allowing IRA terrorists to hang around Boston. The thing is that when you have people who are openly extremists and you're basically just saying, yeah, they're just Sikh activists. One, again, 100%, that's an insult to Sikh people. That would be like saying Catholics are part of the IRA automatically just from being Catholic. It's completely disgusting. But what we have right now is that we have a situation where the chaos was started by Canada 4 years ago. It wasn't just something that just fell out of the sky and it's because India just doesn't respect sovereignty, so they're doing this. If it was a terrorist that was in the US or the UK, the extradition order probably actually would have gone through. But because Justin Trudeau is, do you know the concept of radical chic? It's kind of like that's his approach to foreign policy. He thinks he's so fashionable by being the one man in the world who can see virtue in terrible movements and countries. So he cozies up to the Iran regime, even though they blew a flight out of the sky just like the Khalistanis and killed hundreds of Canadians, and they verifiably did it on purpose. He cozies up to the communist Chinese and talks about how much he loves their basic dictatorship. He soft pedals at terrorist groups who attack Israel. He does this to all of our allies. It's a complete pattern with him, and I think the pattern started with the Khalistanis movement 40 years ago with his father.
Advait, I just want to come quickly on the issue of Nijar. I was reading in the course of my research for a piece which will appear tomorrow. I was reading a piece on Nijar by the Globe and Mail newspaper of Canada. I understand that it's probably the most well-read newspaper. They have been quite sympathetic to Nijar. Actually, they came out with a hagiographic piece saying that he's a plumber. But in that piece, while if you had read that piece, you will see that even in that piece, it is very interesting how Nijar got Canadian citizenship. In 1998, when he first applied for citizenship, he was rejected because it was the Canadian immigration authorities thought that he was faking it. Apparently, the doctor's certificate that he produced in support of his claim that he was tortured in prison is that where it was written that his intesticles were tortured, and there's no such word called intesticle, so that was rejected. Within 11 days of that rejection, and in a foreign country, this man called Ravi Sharma, who had adopted the name of Ravi Sharma, he arranged a marriage with a divorced Sikh woman who was already an established citizen of Canada. I don't know how quickly he did that. He's quite resourceful, apparently. And that was also rejected by the Canadian authorities, saying that this marriage was fake. And then neither does Nijar's son Baldev, nor does his notorious lawyer Panun. None of them know that under what circumstances, from that point of view, and from that point on, did Nijar get Canadian citizenship in 2007. No one knows. There is no official record. Trudeau likes to say that we are a rule of law country. Where is the rule of law? Show us the record of how Nijar got Canadian citizenship. There is no document to prove that.
Yeah, not only did they claim it was 2007, but they only claimed it was 2007 after they claimed it was 2015, and they only claimed it was 2015 after they couldn't tell anyone if he was a citizen or not for a day or two, which you think this is just basically a bureaucratic check-in, just to like, oh, is he a citizen? And then you should be able to find out in a few seconds. And I'm wondering if it was like, they don't even today, maybe he got a citizenship, and I guarantee either He wants to say something.
No, I'm just saying one thing. These things, it's like feeding milk to snakes. You think these scoundrels will not come back and attack Canada? They will. They feed off the land that supplies them with ammunition, with encouragement. That's the nature of the beast. America has learnt it. Indira Gandhi promoted Bhindranwale, and she was shot dead, sadly, by assassins. We have learned these lessons closer home. These lessons will come to you as well. You can either be a responsible country, or you can be a country which has this fraudulent demeanor about itself. Oh, we are very liberal. Bullshit! What liberal are you? How bloody liberal is Canada? Liberal in harboring terrorists? Is that your brand of liberalism? Is Trudeau's brand of liberalism promoting Zelensky, who we all know is minting money, using the war as an excuse? But I don't even want to go there. Our limited view is, shouldn't Canada jettison Trudeau? Now, I don't know what the parliamentary procedure is. Everyone there is in bed. Everyone needs everyone's support. So in the process, you're doing three things. You are destroying the integrity and credibility of what Canada was all about. Number two, you are destroying a great relationship that India and Canada once shared. And number three, you're telling people that you don't need to go to the Irans of the world or the Iraqs of the world. Come to Canada. The maple leaf welcomes you and will wrap you in its affection so that to foster terrorism. This is what you want to be? Really?
It's true that Canada legitimately has become basically one of the top, if not the top, areas in the world, or at least the Western world, for money laundering, and it's because we just don't take things seriously. It's like the Iranian IRGC. Again, they blew up flight PS 752 with hundreds of people on it, including, I think it was at least 150 Canadians who died on that flight, and we didn't decide to list the IRGC on the terrorism watch list, which would have actually allowed us to crack down on regime-affiliated businesses and individuals who raise money in Canada and send it off to Iran so they can use it for the Al-Quds Force and other sort of terrorist groups like the Hamas and Hezbollah that Iran backs people places like Islamic Jihad and stuff like that. And the same thing with the Khalistani extremist groups. There's a reason why they're heavily involved in organized crime in Canada. And again, like we were saying, it's because the regular Sikh community hates their guts. They want nothing to do with them because there's a lot of Sikh people in Canada. If Sikh people were in support of a Khalistani extremist movement, if everyone gave $5, they'd have enough money for the year. But there's 771,000 Sikh people in Canada. The reason they have to get involved in organized crime is because they don't want to fund this crap. But in Canada, it's sort of like we've embraced this idea that we're tolerant because we're mild. Because we're just mild about everything, that means we're tolerant. It's like it's not actually. Being tolerant of intolerant extremist people is not tolerant at all. It's just allowing someone to basically bully their way into getting everything that they want. That's not being tolerant. That's just being pathetic. And the thing that happens with political power in Canada and why a lot of extremist groups are able to get a foothold and they're not called out is also because we have, this sounds kind of strange to say, but with the very limited amount of money that Canadians are allowed to donate into politics, it makes extremist kind of groups very useful because the maximum donation in Canada is about $16.25 federally, which is not that much money in theory, in the sense that the U.S. you could donate $100,000 to a PAC and it's completely fine. But that's still a lot of money for someone to give, but then rich people can't give nearly as much. But extremist groups can, like, at some sort of institution, can get 60 people to max out a donation when the average Canadian wouldn't be willing to give more than $100 to a political party. So it makes groups who have ulterior motives very powerful because they don't mind giving over massive amounts of money. Also, our political primary or nomination system for the parties is a little bit broken just based on the fact that you have to pay for a party nomination in order to vote in a nomination race. So the problem is when you can easily become the party's nominee in a very safe riding with just 400 votes or something like that, there doesn't have to be that many crazy people in order to actually have a lot of influence and sway. And not only can they get certain people elected who will back them up, they can get themselves elected quite often. This is why you can have people like Jagmeet Singh and, in my province, Parmeet Singh Bhopari, who literally openly is a Khalistani and posts things about like in favor of Khalistan with like people with AK-47s and RPGs and music videos that he's posting on his old Facebook pages and whatnot. These people can get into politics because nobody asks any questions about them, and it's easy to sort of rig the nomination system in order to get crazy people across the finish line.
Right. Professor, let's get you in, and then Sandip, of course. I think Wyatt makes a really important point about funding, political funding, because a lot of times the questions that we've been asking here is that when these people are so overt, when they're putting up posters with hit lists of our embassy staff on Canadian soil, and all you're hearing from the Canadian government is free speech, free speech. We're wondering, how can this be permitted? Our High Commission, for example, is attacked in Canada.
Advaita, I think we are overplaying Justin Trudeau's part a bit too much. Justin Trudeau has played a part, but this is a Canadian problem. Mr. Niger was naturalized as a Canadian citizen when there was a Conservative Party ruling Canada. So this has been part of a problem. It's suddenly blown up in front of our faces, because Trudeau has its own ties with this particular section. But let's step back. Suhel talked about there was friendly Indo-Canadian relations long ago. People forget that India was able to become part of the Commonwealth, although we became a republic, because William Lyon Mackenzie King, the then Prime Minister of Canada, supported India's bid to remain in the Commonwealth. He was absolutely clear that India would not be a constitutional democracy or a constitutional monarchy or a dominion given our relations with the United Kingdom. So India would appropriately remain a republic, but also be part of the Commonwealth. And Canadians supported India's stand, and Canadians also supported us with assistance. I mean, ministers like Mackenzie King, Samalara, Lester Pearson were very friendly where India is concerned. Part of the problem is twofold. Externally, there has been a diminishing of the Canadian presence. There was a time where India and Canada were both nominees or contenders for a place in the Security Council, a permanent member. Somewhere down the line, the Canadians have fallen off and the Indian star is on the rise. But this particular problem, I think starts in the 1980s. It has roots in Canada. You had a Sikh diaspora, and the parts of the Sikh diaspora got extremely restive during the Punjab agitation and especially Blue Star. And let us face it, the Americans were happy about it, and the Canadians, given internal politics, particularly the father, Pierre Trudeau, refused to take any action against the more extremist elements which went on ahead basically to plant the bomb. But that's bridge down the river. For a long time, our relations with the Canadians, especially under Stephen Harper, were on the rise. One of the reasons is the Khalistan movement, was not gaining traction anywhere. And so while it remained at a subterranean level in Canada, the Canadian Conservative Party had no incentive, so to speak, to basically boost these people. With the coming of Justin Trudeau and certain things happening in Punjab as well, two things have come together. One of the things, certainly, which I think Borden talked about, is this politics of intersectionality, which Justin Trudeau basically believes in and actually plays. Look, Justin Trudeau has burnt his boats not just with India, even with the Europeans. There was talk about the Europeans trying to diversify their gas supply, trying to get gas from Canada so as to reduce their dependence on the Russians. For some reason, and they emanate from the Canadian side, this did not materialize. So when you have a very unstable person as a prime minister, and that prime minister is beholden to that section of the party which is organized, as Watt said, an organization means that you are able to basically fund huge amounts legally into a political organization because there is a bypassing the cap on individual donations. So for a number of reasons, all these things coming together, you have a mess on your hands. Now, whether India did actually have a hand in this assassination or not, I think that is unreasonable, because we know the best way to hurt these people is to hurt them hurt their pockets, and that is precisely what India is doing. We are confiscating under law the properties of these characters. I think Pannu's property in Chandigarh has been confiscated. Nij's property is also on the verge of being confiscated. That is the way to hit them, not assassinations. India knows this. And once you start hurting them where it really hurts, their pockets. Remember, this lot does not believe in Khalistan at all. It's an avaricious lot. Hit them where they hurts, damage them financially, and they will come to heel. And that is what India is doing, and that is what India needs to do. But what has happened, I think, needs to be addressed, and I think the Indian response has been measured. It is the Prime Minister of Canada which is making the statements, and it is an MEA, the Ministry of External Affairs spokesman, who is giving the responses. What needs to be done on the ground, we are doing. We are not basically, blowing it up, making it high profile, investing a lot of prestige into it. So we don't need to back down. On the other hand, backing down for Canada has become difficult because it's the Prime Minister of Canada who has actually left this charge.
Yes, and in the Parliament. And Sandip, that's what I wanted to bring to you also, Professor. Sandip, I want to bring that to you. I mean, it's insane. We woke up in the morning and Trudeau's in his Parliament making these kind of wild allegations, and he keeps dialing down on them, right? So first he said, now he's down to, I think, credible allegations, which is so strange, even in terms of verbiage. You think that if you were accusing a country's agents democratic countries' agents of assassinating. I don't even know whether the word assassinate is correct for this guy, but according to them, a Canadian plumber. Uh, why would you use the floor of the house with words like credible allegations and go out in full public glare?
See, first of all, Advaita, we have discussed Trudeau enough, and I personally think we are focusing too much attention on Trudeau himself. It's a larger game plan, is what we should look at and be worried about. Because if it was just Trudeau himself, and for whatever provocations he does, whether for his internal politics, etc., and he's been advised maybe to do it in the parliament, I don't think that one should not lose sleep on that. And the way he was going and the way Canada has been, which was our original topic of discussion, it is, you're talking of credible evidence here. It is a common knowledge and fact that Canada has been harboring Khalistanis and other, very, very suspect characters from all over the world, including somebody saying the Sheikh Mujibur Rahman's killer was also given safe haven in Canada. So this has been their tradition. We know there has been enough books, everything written about the genesis of the Khalistan movement in Canada, that how they have harbored. We know what happened during the farmers' protest and everything. So that's a known fact. And if India did not act in some way or the other, I'm not necessarily saying by extraterritorial killings or something, but India cannot be sitting there idle, without either engaging or whichever form building pressure on them to get out of it. Otherwise, we are, one point which I asked, that how would any of the Western countries or Five Eyes reacted if they knew there were secessionist forces who were trying to destabilize their country or dismember their country sitting in India? Would they say, no, we will not act, and it's because of ABCD reasons? So I think Trudeau is not. Trudeau is only part of the problem. The problem arises, I think, a much larger problem if there is a bigger game plan. Because I personally think there are a lot of people around the world who are unhappy with Narendra Modi's rise and the status of BJP, and they realize that the third term can make him sort of invincible. And therefore, to cut him down to size is essential. They couldn't do anything before G20, and G20 went off with a tremendous success. So the timing, just as you said, if Trudeau had something to say and do, he should have done it while he was sitting here in India, and he got additional 2 days or 3 days to even have a private chat. He didn't do anything, so he was waiting to go back and fire this salvo. So this is all pretty, I think, well-timed, calibrated, and orchestrated. Now, the point is, how does this Five Eyes or international community deal? There is one section of the global press which you find that immediately have taken on the cudgels on behalf of both Canada and the West, and that gives them another more potent, I wouldn't say stick, but agenda to beat India down on. Now, in this situation, how India tackles. Someone wrote, I think it was Sheila who tweeted that probably the only mistake people are making, that while they might think that this is appropriate time to clip Narendra Modi's wings, I think they're getting the timing wrong from multiple ways, both internally and externally. Because Narendra Modi is today in a situation where he is not going to blink. If even the worst case scenario of some people manage to defeat him, he will then have a case very strongly to say, see, there are international forces who aligned against me to pull me down. And that is something which will, which can cause real issues within the country, which others would also be wary of. So what's been bothering me the last 2 or 3 days It is not about this Trudeau or what he has said, whether he is dialing down. My bigger worry is there are people from here who are now, very eminent journalists who are beginning to say, oh, Punjab has many problems, this Khalistan is not one of them. Of course, Khalistan is a problem. Someone pointed out how Punjab has always been ruled by Sikhs, Sikh chief ministers. So if they have that, for them it's not a problem. For who it is, we are not saying every Sikh or every Punjabi in India is a Khalistani or they support the Khalistan cause, but the Khalistan cause affects every person in the
Yes,
country.
but Sandip, I mean, it is a fringe movement in India. Go ahead, Suhel.
I mean, he's dead and may God rest his soul. KPS Gill was a very, very dear friend of mine, and I say it with grave responsibility. When he was down and out, he was rarely invited out, but he was always a permanent fixture at home, and I loved talking to him. Many, many years ago, I asked him, I said, Gill Sahab, Punjab which ki hoya means what happened in Punjab? And he says it was very clear. There was disillusionment stoked by political elements, which at that time were Indira Gandhi and her ilk, and a lot of funding which came from overseas. And at that time, he mentioned Canada and the United Kingdom. But we are also ballless as a country. And let me tell you why. Today, in Parliament, you have a guy called Simranjeet Singh Mann, who has owed allegiance to Khalistan. He's sitting in India's Parliament, which means willy-nilly he has to take the oath of allegiance to the Indian Constitution. The Election Commission, being as goddamn toothless as it is, should have disqualified this rascal, but they haven't. Let me tell you the situation in Punjab, because A, I'm from there, and B, I visited more often than anyone here does. What had happened was, in the period when the Badals were in power, there was absolute chaos at three levels. One, there was rampant corruption. Number two, there was unchecked, uncontrolled flow of drugs and arms and ammunition from across the border. And number three, there was complete joblessness. So this whole thing about Udata Punjab and, drug dependency were real issues. Then came Amrinder as chief minister, Congress chief minister. But obviously, being so bloody brilliant that Rahul Gandhi and Priyanka Gandhi are, they screwed even that up by promoting that joker, Navjot Singh Sidhu, to come in and screw around with him. Punjab today is in disaster mode because they've got a clown as chief minister. He's a stand-up comic. So you don't expect very much from him. I mean, I hate to say this. There's another stand-up comic in the world. He's called Zelensky. So you have one stand-up comic in Ukraine, you have another stand-up comic in Punjab. Why is Punjab critical? A, it's a border state. Number two, it's a state which is rich and at the same time deeply poor. Please understand that the dichotomy that is going through Punjab needs to be addressed with grave seriousness. And I have to say, none of the political parties today, including the BJP, have addressed this seriously. So, when you stoke the fires of a Khalistan, and when you promise more money, you promise an independent state, it's not going to happen. It is not going to happen in our lifetime, and it is not going to happen in Trudeau's son's lifetime as well. There will be no Khalistan, but there'll be noise. What you hope to do through that noise is stoke divisiveness. That's my worry. And let me tell you, Wyatt, and it's, you're just a representative, you're not even part of the government or whatever. The tragedy is that people don't realize that you are actually treading dangerous territory. A terrorist owes allegiance to no one except to the gun. He is loyal to no one except to a fictitious cause in his head. And he cares for no life other than his own. All this suicide bombers and all, bullshit. So let me tell you, Khalistan will not happen. But what will happen is the following. Indo-Canadian relations will never be the same, ever. Number two, Justin Trudeau will continue to be shamed internationally. Not that it matters to him, he's too thick-skinned. Number three, people of Indian origin, whether they're Hindus or Sikhs, will be tarred with the same brush. And that is distressing. That is something that is avoidable. And that Wyatt, people like you who are intellectuals, who are part of the media, can change that narrative. You know, every Indian there is not a supporter of Khalistan. Every Sikh living in Canada is not a supporter of Khalistan. To serve your goddamn ill-conceived, ill-fashioned, manipulative narrative, don't make that happen. Don't play with a community that is full of bravery, that has always stood by the country, and that has always saluted the flag.
Okay, quick programming note.
I'll just say one point.
Just 1 second, Sandip. One second. A quick programming note, please. We have over 1,500 people watching, but please go ahead and like the broadcast, because then that improves the algorithm and we pop up more on Fine. So don't forget to do that. I have to say it, Suhel, because I always forget to say like, share, subscribe, but go ahead and do that. And yeah, so we'll come to Sandip and of course Wyatt as well. Wyatt, another thing that's coming up.
This is the tragedy. We are discussing a serious issue, but I have to change.
Wyatt, another thing that's going on in India is, Baloch activist Karima Baloch was killed in Canada. There was no response from Trudeau. Then we're all aware of China's Project Fox Hunt, and a dissident who was living in actually an upscale neighborhood who was murdered in 2021, I think. Again, and he had spoken about being targeted by the Chinese. Again, there's nothing on that from Trudeau. Also, for our viewers, can you explain the recent allegations against Trudeau when it comes to his relationship with China?
Yeah, so the CCP interference scandal, this is why when Justin Trudeau first made his allegations against India, the knee-jerk reaction from people like me is to assume that he never is going to have any evidence. Maybe he's going to have evidence next week. It sounds like maybe he'll be able to provide something, but that's why everyone has a knee-jerk reaction to not believe him in this country, because he tends to have a very long history of lying, and the CCP interference scandal in Canada is chief among them. Because Justin Trudeau, when there was very, very good evidence that the CCP was basically setting up illegal front group operations and trying to swing elections in specific districts, or when there's evidence that the CCP is going around intimidating Chinese residents to basically tell them not to basically speak out against the Chinese government, or to vote or to not vote the way that they want to. That Justin Trudeau, in the midst of all that, basically buried all the evidence, and he refused to actually release any of it. We even had an MP in our country who was having the life of his family threatened in Hong Kong by a Chinese diplomat. And when that finally came out, it literally took an entire week of Canadians pushing on social media platforms demanding he be removed from the country for it to actually happen. And the thing is that it took a week to do that, but it took an even longer period of time for them to even admit that diplomat was making those crazy statements. And the journalists who were actually reporting on this, a man named Sam Cooper from Global News, he was effectively bullied out of his job for doing the right thing and reporting on all the CCP stuff. But basically, they launched a bunch of lawfare lawsuits at him, and then Global News dumped him, thinking that he's too much of a liability now. So basically, for doing very good work and actually having integrity, he was rewarded by being kicked out of his job and having to go work at a smaller independent outlet. Still doing good stuff, but that's just kind of the way things go. And on another note, just wanting to talk about, because I think Suhel, when he brought up the danger that kind of comes with calling out Khalistanis, he's 100% right. There was a Liberal MP about a couple of years ago who called out the Khalistani movement that was actually taking over the Liberal Party. He said that there's literally Khalistanis in the cabinet, and even today there is still at least one that's in the cabinet, and there might be more in the caucus. That this man, Ramneesh Sangha, who of course himself is Sikh, literally it was getting so dangerous for him because he would call out Khalistanis in liberal political movements that he had to have bodyguards every single time he entered like a coffee shop, walk inside, scope it out to make sure no one's going to whack him. That's the thing that we have in Canada, where let's just hypothetically say India did kill Najjar, they hired someone, or they did it themselves with agents. Okay, but why are we so outraged by this from Trudeau's perspective when he lets anyone else operate on Canadian soil, including the Chinese government? And it's just considered a no big deal, a who cares. So I'm not saying that it's a who cares if then India did it, because we should probably, because I don't think it's the most productive thing for us to be, killing people on each other's soil. At the same time, all it would represent would be a continuation of what Justin Trudeau is effectively already allowing from other countries. But yeah, no, it's one of these things where I think that more education is needed, and I think one of the most positive developments that's taken place during this entire scandal or this entire fight with India is that there's way more media attention once again on the Khalistani movement. So you see even at the temple that Najjar headed up that had these signs promoting the referendum and killing Indian officials, suddenly they run outside with hammers and saws and they start taking down all their signs, because it turns out when Canadians are actually exposed to what these people are saying, and it's not just considered some curiosity that people who live around the suburb are exposed to, these people start panicking and they start getting rid of all their stuff because they realize that this is quite radical. But the liberal media doesn't really ever want to talk about it because they, of course, get funded by the liberal government who has Khalistanis in it. So you're more likely to lose your job by calling this sort of stuff out.
Right. And we had a question for you also, Wyatt. Let me just ask that to you very quickly. This is from Naman. Like the NDP is to Liberal Party, and their Khalistani roots, are there Khalistani roots in the Conservative Party too?
I don't doubt that they try. I haven't met any Khalistanis in the Conservative Party yet. And all the people I've talked to that I've worked with, they're always the people who, as soon as you bring up Khalistan, they roll their eyes because they just absolutely hate hearing about the subject.
Glad to hear that. And there's one more for you, Wyatt. Why can't Conservatives grow a spine in Canada and hold Trudeau accountable? They've hardly been in the news.
Well, they're holding him accountable more on domestic issues, and there was a practical reason why they're not going to talk about this fight with India too much. The leader of the Conservative Party, Parapolyev, did ask for more information and more evidence regarding the India situation, because they don't exactly want to wade into an issue and back. Even if you're a Canadian patriot, you don't exactly want to back your country when the information is extremely vague on what we're working with here. So they've been saying that, but I think it's one of those things where right now it's not an issue that many Canadians know about. I doubt more than 10% of Canadians know what a Khalistani is. So then we're running into the issue where they really can't talk about this issue and have anyone understand what they're saying, because in Canada, I think foreign policy is probably the most abused area of public policy. People don't know what it's about. People just know that, wars happen and sometimes Canada supports the good guy or whatever, and Canada does other sorts of humanitarian outreach. Canada's a country where I don't think that people have more than a very frivolous view of how foreign policy works. It's very much like state visits as much as people know about foreign policy, that sometimes Trudeau shows up to a foreign country and makes a fool of himself.
And is Trudeau coming back? I think this is something that we're all wondering about. I think elections are a year away.
It's in 2025. He can wait it out. And the problem...
Oh, gosh. Okay, I thought it was 2025.
Yeah. Based on all the polling, there's almost no chance he could win. But the problem is that he doesn't have an incentive to call an election because, one, his polling sucks, and two, both he and the NDP propping him up are broke. Because the thing is, who knew that socialists are bad with money? But basically, their fundraising has just dried up over the years, and people don't think they're going to win. So in the last 3 quarters, when the Conservative Party of Canada raises like $8.4 million, the Liberal Party's only raised $4 million. And so, yeah, that's money. But the thing is, when you have to run an election campaign in a country the size of Canada, and you're only making less than half of what the Conservatives are, you're going to be so out of luck. The best that they can probably do is just defend the ridings that they already have, and they'll probably have to start writing off a bunch of them ahead of the next election, and then just don't bother spending any money because it's going to be a sick hole to dump money into.
Mm-hmm. Shrimoy, one question for you. Can India ask FATF that Canada be put under its blacklist?
No, I don't think that is a possibility. I think that is a very far-fetched idea. That's not going to happen. But there's one thing I wanted to add to what is saying, and I think we are not we in India certainly we are not focusing too much on that. Who's gaining the most from this fracas in Canada? If you look at the Canadian politics, who's gaining the most? It's obviously Trudeau himself because he can now put all those focus back on him. But the second most important country who gains when India is in the
China.
yeah, it's China. And
Yeah.
it is not a coincidence. It is not a coincidence that Trudeau raised this issue in Parliament just a few days after he was forced to launch a formal inquiry into election interference by China in Canadian elections in 2019 and 2021, which apparently was, China was the working theory is that China interfered so that Trudeau can be back in power. And the Trudeau regime initially resisted. They did not want to launch this inquiry. They kind of stalled. They had underwent all sorts of stalling tactics. They finally launched it this month, and then this happened. And so now China is smiling. The second thing, and this is at Sandip, I don't think that there is a grand international conspiracy to
I agree.
unseat Modi. I absolutely don't believe that. I think if anything, this controversy will end up strengthening his hands. That's my limited thing.
Okay,
I'll come in now.
and
I'll briefly come in now. Please come in now.
Okay, go ahead, Professor.
I've said I agree with Shrima. This is Justin Trudeau's Suez moment. In a sense, he's basically sunk himself, and he's sunk Canada as well. See, it is true that the Five Eyes do share intelligence. Now, you can always twist intelligence, massage intelligence, and present it in a particular way. I cannot, for the life of me, imagine Stephen Harper doing this on the floor of the House with where India is concerned. Justin Trudeau, yes, I can imagine this. So there is a domestic problem that Justin Trudeau has. There is a setup where intelligence is gathered, and do the Americans spy on allies? Ask the Germans, ask the Scandinavians, the Americans do. Some of this information would have been collated to provide what are called credible allegations. I assume Trudeau knows what the meaning of credible allegations are, and therefore you have this particular mess. This is a mess Trudeau cannot back out of. And this is a mess India is not accelerating. From India's side, who are the ones who are making the statements? Relatively junior officials in the MEA. India is not investing any prestige into this. And recently we had a meeting of the Quad also. This was not raised in the Quad. As a gesture to convention, Blinken said certain things. As a gesture to convention, after all, Canada is family. You had Sullivan saying certain things. I remain, those statements will remain statements. On this, I think Trudeau is isolated. Had there been a conspiracy, I think you would have seen a crescendo of all the countries joining in to embarrass India. That is not happening. And therefore, I think it's a Trudeauist thing than a conspiracy thing.
Okay.
Well, I just wanted to mention something about the potential evidence that's been kind of coming out. So when you have people coming out from like the Five Eyes as well as potential U.S. diplomats saying, yeah, Canada does have some information, including signals intelligence, and what they've been focusing on is that they might have had Indian officials in Canada saying things, and this is how vague it is. I don't even know what they're even saying is being said. And this is what's so frustrating, is that even if Trudeau turns out to be right, it's like, was he really right? Because you don't just throw out accusations when you don't have your evidence in place. It's foolish and it creates chaos for no reason. Anyways, but if it signals intelligence, I want to know what the signals intelligence specifically says. Because because I don't want to just be that they're railroading an official who said something negative or even violent about Najjar before he died. Like, Najjar effectively seems like he's part of a gang. I wouldn't be that surprised if another gang whacked him. I'm not saying that's how it happened, but this is why we need as hard evidence as possible, because I hope that they're not just going to leak these tiny vague insinuations that an Indian government official in Canada might have basically said, kill Najjar or something like that. But they're not actually going to show us if they said that or not. Did they just say, I hate that guy, I wish someone would kill him, and then he died next week? I hope it's a little bit more than that. I'm not saying that that's what it is, but this is why I'm frustrated, because we're in a situation where you're just supposed to either believe Justin Trudeau or not believe him. And that even when the Five Eyes is coming out, they don't even really want to get into it right now, because the thing is that my thing is that if you have intelligence showing people potentially saying go kill that guy, why would you expel an Indian diplomat from the country? Why wouldn't you get permission to arrest him and charge him? Basically, get his diplomatic immunity removed from him, so you could charge him. And that's what I'm thinking, is that it seems like we're oddly surefire confident on what we're all saying when we've not gotten a murder weapon or even a suspect. And maybe that's just too hard. Maybe it's like, hey, whoever got him is just is some sort of like, super spy or whatever, and you're never going to get him. And if that's true, it's like, well, we kind of can't do anything about it anyway, so we're basically just all yelling at the moon here.
Yeah, and what's hilarious in some ways is how the media, the Canadian media, that's obviously singing from the same playbook as a prayer book, hymn book rather, as Trudeau, is going on and on about Indian agents having killed a Canadian plumber. I don't understand why agents from a country would go after a Canadian plumber. So, I mean, it's so ridiculous, even the kind of justifications or the kind of verbiage that is being used to describe this particular situation. But again, I want to thank all of you for watching, and I want to thank you for coming. Thank you, Wyatt. It's about 9:30, 10 a.m. on a Sunday, so I really appreciate
you. Promise to come back to me, but as usual, you don't keep your promises.
Sandip.
I'll let it go. Don't worry.
Let the man say
No, don't let it go. Don't let it go.
Sandip comes
Take it to
late. He comes late to the show, and then he's all
I was
offended.
not late at all. I was not late at all.
course you were late.
Do not let her go.
I wait my turn patiently as the tail ender, and thereafter I am cut off and told that I will come back to you, which people don't. But
This is the 17th time she's done it to you. 17th time. Because even I can't imagine a Bengali being insulted so often and not doing anything about it.
Fair enough, I get it. I have nothing of consequence to contribute in this very high power.
Oh, now don't, yeah. Now we'll all be emotionally bankrupt. Fine, yeah. Now, okay. Why don't we extend the show by another 5 minutes? Let Sandip speak.
No.
Sandip, please. We're all waiting. We're peaking in terms of viewers. We are at 1,500.
Thank you so much for allowing me the privilege of those 5 minutes of glory. Thank you. Great discussion. Good night.
She's against us Bengalis. This wretched Pahari woman.
Why this happens once a month? Sandip, please, we're waiting for you. Please.
No, I'm done. Nothing of consequence.
Arey, yaar, now say it, yaar. Now all of us will have to beg and plead. Just say it.
My point is very simple. One is, this whole issue about Hathi ka ek daant, dikhane ka ek daant khane ka. It can be interpreted in two ways. What, say the West and other people are saying, one hand you can say they're just doing lip service to their Five Eye ally. Another way you see that, they are playing a very intelligent good cop, bad cop kind of a thing. They're getting Trudeau to do the dirty job for them. And while, making the right noises from the background. So I would not, while one is not saying there's a great international conspiracy to oust Modi or be this thing, but all that I said is there could be a plan to at least cut him to size. That's what one point which I was trying to make. The other point is, of course, Khalistan won't be a reality. In India, people can't do, but they have the potential with all the money and the support they get from outside as well as the elements inside to cause enough trouble or destabilization. We know how certain political parties were funded, or certain, how things happened at one point in one state. It could. We know how the farmers' movement was, ramped up. I don't think those are. You need any credible evidence. Those are, people choose to ignore. They can look the other way, but everybody knows how those things happened. And now that when you're running into 2024 election, we know that a lot of people would be very happy to get the largest from these kind of elements. So that's all I was trying to make. I may be a pessimist, and I might be seeing really the glass half full. But I think there are reasons for us to be circumspect and not be blasé about it. Thank you.
And Sandeep, one more question for you is, what do you think?
One more question for you. You're the ultimate patsy.
There's such catty people. I'm sorry, Wyatt.
Okay.
Sandeep, last question for you is really, we've cancelled the visas for Canadian citizens in our missions all over the world. Canada, of course, has not done that in response. Do you see this escalating in the next week, or do you see this being dialed back?
I think these are no. It certainly is a conscious escalation. Unlike the Congress boycott of certain anchors and then keep sending anchors, I don't think we'll be issuing visas on the sly. If we have to withdraw it, we will withdraw the ban later on once things de-escalates. But these are, Shrima and others would know, these are very standard diplomatic signaling. Just like you ask people to downsize their embassy strength every time Pakistan outs one of our diplomats, we also do reciprocate. So all these things will happen. If you don't do that, then you're not doing any signaling. But one would not really read too much into it. I think the real escalation would happen in the words. Like today you found, for example, one thing, I don't know whether we discussed, Hardeep Singh Puri raking the whole Kanishka episode in one of his tweets. And, so India is not really backing off. While Jaishankar is maintaining a studied silence, except somewhere he talked about we still live in a world of double standards or something he has said. But you'll find India is not really dialing down in terms of what's the communication which is happening. I think that's being played pretty well. As Professor said, we're leaving the official talking to be done by an MEI spokesperson, not raising the level above that. But other messages are going down pretty well. And to my surprise, I find that even some of our internal journalists, as well as BBC and other people, have carried, fairly supportive of commentary, which is actually running Trudeau down. So I think that's happening. And that's why I said in the beginning, Advaita, I think if people have chosen, try to take on Narendra Modi now, they've probably chosen a wrong time, because now Narendra Modi is not going to easily back off at this juncture and, fritter away all the equity he has built globally as well as in the country by one such setback.
Okay, and on that note, Sunday Club for this week draws to a close. Do remember to like, share, subscribe. Don't forget to do that. Suhel, mute yourself. And thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. And we will look forward to seeing you during the course of the week.
Wyatt, I apologize on behalf of India.
No
we
worries,
normally don't
no
have
worries.
such kind of anchors.
No
Yeah,
worries.
whatever.
Yeah, they don't
Yes,
even
but-
boycott us. They don't even boycott us. They simply ignore us.
Wyatt, do you want to say anything since you're our guest? And in India, we're very good with guests. Do you want to say
Bullshit. We don't give a
something?
rat's ass about guests. Now let's go. It's 8:04. God bless you, Wyatt. I hope you win.
Yeah.
Yeah, Wyatt, I hope you win.
This is too much.
Okay, thank you.
কেটে যাচ্ছে
everybody.
কেটে যাচ্ছে রক্ত বেরোচ্ছে না কেটে যাচ্ছে রক্ত বেরোচ্ছে না চলো সালা যাই এখন খাওয়াটা খাই